Hi, me again. Today I'm going to be talking about my personal favourite multiverse comic. Now, I know it's older age. We've even got not just Marvel films and DC films, but mainstream films doing stuff about the multiverse. But Marvel and DC weren't the first to do it, and in fact, it was a guy from Wigan who did one of the earliest multiverse comics, and that was a guy called Brian Talbot. And he initially did his story in not quite an underground comic, but not quite a mainstream comic. It was a comic produced in England called Near Myths back in the late 70s, early 80s. I'd like to say this is where people like Grant Morrison got the start in comics as well. Hold on. Oh, so good. Sorry. And so yeah, in Near Myths he created this character. Oh, before we get into that, I'll go a bit of background about Brian Talbot. So Brian Talbot, like I said, he's a guy from Wigan. He started in Near Myths, but then he went on to more mainstream stuff. Well, mainstream was in 2000 AD with comics like comic strips. He took over from Brian Talbot, not from Brian Talbot, from Kevin O'Neill in Nemesis, and he did stuff for Robusters, Judge Dredd, ABC Warriors, and series strips like that in 2000 AD back in the early 80s. But while he was doing that, in conjunction with that, like I said, he did a strip in Near Myths, which he did up to the early 80s, called Luther Arkwright. And then when that comic folded, he decided to first of all repackage the strips he did in Near Myth as a very early graphic novel. And now I don't know if it's one of the first ones, but it was the early 80s anyway when he did it. And then he did the strip serialized in comic book format. I remember getting this in the mid 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. And this was it. And then later on, because this like really made his name, but this got the attention of American comic companies, so especially DC. So he got commissioned to do work for series like The Sandman, and he also did a mini-series, a prestige mini-series with what was his name? I'm having a brain fart. Don't get old. What was it? Rick Veitch's brother, who I can't remember his first name, but somebody Veitch anyway. And they did a prestige series in DC called the Naz. And that was a great series. But Luther Arkwright was Brian Talbot's baby. That was the one where he really made his name. And Dark Horse got decided to publish it. Initially, they published the black and white, because initially it was done as a black and white comic. So they did the first series, black and white series, in a repackaged, reformatted graphic novel, and then then he did a sequel to it in colour for Dark Horse, and then both of them got released together in an omnibus, which is what I got here. And I'll just read the back of it, because like I said, this was like years before Marvel and DC started messing about with multiverse ideas. It says, in a swirling multiverse of endless possibilities and incalculable dangers, malign forces manipulate history through countless timelines and act to wreak destruction across universes. But the fate of these infinite existences depends on one man, an anomaly who exists in but a single universe, a being of vast psychic power capable of travelling between parallel realities, Luther Arkwright. And it says, from Brian Talbot, award-winning graphic novel pioneer, comes the science fiction classics that stunned the comics world and set the bar for audacity, ingenuity, and imagination in graphic storytelling. And like the cream of the crop sang his praises. Neil Gaiman says it's an ambitious tale of parallel worlds that was literally years ahead of its time. Alan Moore, the king, says as a crucial stepping stone between when comics were and where they are now, Brian deserves our gratitude and Luther Arkwright deserves to be read. A perfect example, this is from Mobius now, this bit, who's like, he's up there with Jack Kirby for being godlike talent in comics. A perfect example, not of adult comics, but of comics becoming adults. So yeah, Luther Arkwright, he's basically, this is this guy here with glasses. He is, if you look at old photographs of Brian Talbot when he was younger, he looked like that. So not the Queen, but Luther Arkwright. He reminds me very much of a Michael Moorcock character. I don't know if you've read any series by Michael Moorcock called Jerry Cornelius, and it's that same kind of vibe where he's got almost like Christ, well, JC. So Jerry Cornelius is like an anagram of a Christ-like figure, but obviously with more swearing and sex thrown in. But Luther Arkwright's like that. Like they said, he's the only one of his kind, whereas there's in the other parallel universes, there's multiple versions of different people. It's good because it's got the parallel universes going on, and it's also set like in a steampunk kind of flavour as well. Again, years before anybody really started doing steampunk, Brian Talbot kind of latched onto it. So you've got a lot of Victoriana settings. I'll just show you some of the black and white art, and then you can see some of the colour. So this is some of the black and white art, and it's absolutely breathtaking. Let me just find some more. Now I'll just move on to the colour, and then I'll carry on waffling. And this is the colour. This is woof. Yeah. So it's definitely not for kids. It's as mature and adult as a comic can get. Not just for the graphic nature or the sex, but the storylines. He doesn't play down to you as a reader. It's science fiction for grown-ups. It's I hate using the word superhero because it's not really superhero, but if I was going to introduce somebody who liked, pardon me, if I was going to introduce somebody who liked reading novels, especially like people like Tim Powers, Neil Gaiman, so like sci-fi with a slight fantasy edge, China Melville, I would steer them towards this. For one, if you're used to reading graphic novels, you'd be fine with this because it's a very dense read. I'm not going to lie. If you're just used to like reading your monthly X-Men comics, or I'm always seem to be bashing on the X-Men, just can't stand them at the moment, but your X-Men comics, or even Batman, or any of the latest Image teams like Radiant Black or whatever, it's a big change. It's even more of a challenging read than, say, the Sandman, because the closest I could give it to is it is like an Alan Moore story, or Alan Moore's later stuff where his writing got very dense. And Brian Talbot's the same, and of course, because he's writing it and he's the artist as well, it goes hand in hand. So you really do need to. It's not a book you can read while you've got the telephone in the background. Yeah, by all means put music on, but you need to put aside an hour or two to read a few chapters a night, because it is that kind of read. But I will say it's worth it in the long run. Not many comics stay with me like this. I mean, again, the artwork alone is worth the price of the book. I've had this in the original, when he first did the graphic novel back in the 80s as a one shot. I had that, which only covered like half of the black and white storyline, and then I got the black and white series he did as a comic series, which is self-produced in the 80s and early 90s, I think it was. And then I got the collected editions from Dark Horse, and then I got this. So I've basically had I even had a few issues of Near Myths. I hunted them down just because I was such a fan of his. So I've basically had every incarnation of this. And the reason why I'm plugging it today is I was just mooching about on Amazon. I don't like to advertise them, but, you know, Mr. Bezos' company. And I think in July or August this year, they're bringing out a sequel to this. So there's going to be a third adventure of Luther Arkwright. So I do recommend you looking out for that. But in the meantime, buy that book. It's amazing. It's not cheap. It's $39.99, but but if you get it from an online seller, you can get it quite reasonable, or even try eBay, and you won't be disappointed. It's money well spent. I mean, there's over 500 pages, so it's a big book. The artwork's gorgeous. The writing is so good, but it's dense, especially the first series. Extremely dense, but the payoff is worth it. I mean, what you most likely do initially is just flick through the pages, looking at the sheer detail in the artwork, and then dive into the story. But like I said, seriously, put aside time for it, and you'll be rewarded vastly by it. It's one of my all-time reads ever. It's up there. When I did my top 10 a while ago, I was umming and ahhing about putting this in, and I'd say it would have been in a parallel universe. It would have been in there. It's up there. I mean, when you give a top 10, it's just a random pick of 10 books. They weren't my 10 favourites, because I could have grabbed others like V for Vendetta, Watchmen, Ronin, loads of other stuff, Invisibles, you name it. I just want to give 10 what might not have been as pushed by a lot of other people as they should have been. And this is the same. More people need to know about this, so buy it. Anyway, that's me. I've waffled again. I should write down the scripts really, but F it. And why do I always drink when I'm doing this? But who cares? It's nice. Look, microphone. I'm not even sure if it's working. Find out when I play this back. So I shall do another video hopefully later on in the week, and I think it'll be a review of some comics what I've been reading recently. So that's it. Bye.